This is Amud Yomi, Gemara Berachos Daf Yudches Amud Aleph. As we dive into the third parak of Berachos, we learned the Mishnah in the previous year, and we begin by the Gemara on Yud Zayin Amud Beis, as the Gemara discusses the first din of the Mishnah of one who has a meis mutal lefanav is potter from Kriya Shema Tefillah Tefillin Kol Mitzvah Muras B'Torah. Says the Gemara, mutal lefanav him, mutal lefanav lai. It's only if the mace is mutal lefanav. V'remini, I'll ask you as Tira says in the Brayse, Misha Meis mutal lefanav. What should he do? Eichel b'bay sacher. Eat in another house. Let's say one does not have another house, then what should he do? Continues the Brayse. In his friend's house, make a partition and eat. Turn and eat. Don't recline. Don't eat meat. Don't drink wine. And you don't make any brachos. And you don't say Berachos 18a. Moving along to the top of Yechesam and Aleph, continues the Braysa. Vein mevarchin alav, and other people should not be yotze you with the bracha. Vein mizamnin alav, and there's no zimun. Upater mikrisha minatilim minatvilin umakol mitzvos amurais b'Torah. But on Shabbos, meisev, on Shabbos you do recline and eat. Vayechal bazer v'shaisa yayin, you drink wine and eat meat, and you make brachos mizamin, and you part of us, and you say Berachos 18a mevarchin alav. And other people can make brachos for you mizamin alav, and there's a din of zimun. V'chayav chol mitzvah muras b'Torah. Rashba goimer mitoyer shel chayav elu this chayav v'kulam. So before we finish the kasha, says the Gemara, 1 second. What's the difference between the Tanakama and Rashbag? What is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel adding when he says, because you're chayiv in these, you're chayiv in everything? Says the Gemara, the difference is Tasha Shamita, as Rashi explains on the third line, that according to Rav Shimon, you're chayiv and aval as the din of Oina on Shabbos. So back into the Gemara says, what's the kasha? Ketani Miyos, what do we see in this brayso that says, whereas we were medayik from our Mishnah that only if it's mutal lefanav, if the mace is mutal lefanav, is the patur. But if the mace is not mutal lefanav, then there is no patur. Stira answers the Gemara. Amar Rababa explains Rababa Teretz number 1. Tirgama amachzir panav, says Rababa that when the Braysa says that you are potter is only in the last case where he turns his head, meaning only in that case when one is machzir panav, that's where he still is chayiv. That's what the end of the brayso says, he is chayiv. But when the rest of the brayso says there's a patur, that will confer to the Mishnah that mutal lefanav in v'sheina mutal lefanav loy. Continues the Gemara. Rav Ashi Amar says Rav Ashi a different teretz. Since you have to bury them, kim mutal lefanav dami. Shenemar yakum avram avnei mitzvah nemakro meisim lefanai. Calls man shemutal of lekavrai kemutal lefani of dami. Says Rav Ashi a very yisaidistic teretz. Third line in Rashi explains what is Rav Ashi teaching us. There really is going in all the cases, and the halacha is even if they make in another house, there still is a patur, as long as you are the one in control, taking care of the mace. So when our Mishnah said davka mutal lefanav, referred to the same thing. But if it's not in one's control, that's when there is a patur. So it's not physically whether the mace is mutal lefanav or not. Rather, it has to do with who is the one that is achroi, who is the one that is taking care of the mace, regardless if it's lefanav or not. Continues the Gemara, and before we continue, let's continue. We'll make a point afterwards. Meisai in aval mishamra loy. This whole discussion clearly implies the only time there's a patur from Kriya Shema, etc., is if it's one's mace, one's relative. Aval mishamra, if he's being the one that is being a shomer on the mace, just guarding the mace, making sure the mace is not by itself, then there's no patur. V'atanya, asks the Gemara, it says in a brayso, answers the Gemara, The chiddush of the brisa is that if one is actively watching the mace, even if it's not an actual karoif, he is potter. The chiddush of our Mishnah is that when it comes to meisai, even if he's not mishamer it, as long as you are achray for that mace, there's a patur. Now, number 3 is it seems for the past 2 brisais, meisai mishamer in avo mahalech v'zakvarais lo. Sounds like the patur is only if it's one's relative, or if one is actively watching the mace. But what if one is just walking in the cemetery? Sounds like there would be no patur. V'atanya asked the Gemara, says in our brisa 8 lines from the wide lines. And if he does this, so you're mocking the poor, you're mocking the dead, because you're saying Shema, and they're not able to. So ask the Gemara, we see that when you're walking in a Beis HaKvaros, the cemetery, there's a patur as well from saying Shema. Explains the Gemara, over there the patur is davka, specifically within 4 amos of the mace. Whereas our Mishnah is chutz amos, nami patur, it's much more encompassing patur, even chutz from the dalad amos of the mace. We just make one point, that when the Gemara on the very bottom of Amud Beis taught us that this din of the oinain being potter, ve'inoi mivarech, and he doesn't have to make brachas. Rashi, 2 lines to the end of Yizayim Beis, alert, einoi tzarech. You don't need to make the bracha, clearly implying that one is allowed to, as Taisus explains, whereas Rav Rishonim argue, not only are you're not required, but you're not supposed to, and it is usher from making brachas. And we continue 2 lines from the wide lines. Yochas Amid Aleph Kufa. On the first wide line, the Gemara expands this din of a shemer being potter. That what if there's 2 people guarding the mace, then zeh mishamer, this one watches zeh kairei, and then zeh mishamer v'zeh kairei. Ben Azai Omer says Ben Azai b'am b'svina. If they're traveling in a boat with a mace, place the mace in one corner of the boat, and then what? And then the 2 of them could go and daven in a different corner. Continues the brisa. My beinai. Zem shamer. One more time. I lost my place. Excuse me. One more time. So my beinayu, says the Gemara. What is the difference between these 2 shitas? Whether there's a patur on the boat or not? Ravina, says Ravina on the 3rd wide line. You know what the difference is? The question is there a concern for achbarim for a mice on a boat? We're worried for mice on a boat, and therefore the Tanakama said Zeh Shemer, and then Zeh Shemer. Meaning, when they have to alternate, you can't leave the mace in one corner and say Shema in the other corner. Omar Samar and Banazay also, no. We're not worried about mice on the boat, and therefore you don't need to guard the body on the boat, therefore you can leave it in one corner and say Shema in the opposite corner. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, the 4th wide line. Continuing on the theme of tending to a dead body, etc., says the Gemara, if someone is transporting atzamais, human remains, the bones from place to place, should not place them in a sack, put them on the back of a donkey of Yerkvaleim and sit on top of them, and nation that's a mizayin. But if one is worried about the Gayim, then if they are listed in robbers, then mutter. Then what is indeed allowed to ride on top of the bones to protect them from the Gayim and the robbers, etc. Says the Gemara, Kach Amru b'Sefer Torah. The same din is about a Sefer Torah. Says the Gemara, Ahai, what's this last din of Sefer Torah going on? Ilema Reisha. It's going the Reisha that's saying that if there's no danger, if there's no sakana, you're not allowed to sit on top of a Sefer Torah Pshita. Of course not. Because Sefer Torah me'atzamois. Ella as-Sefer. It's going the Sefer teaching us that if there is Akshar sakana, then you are allowed to put it in an area which inherently might be a partial bizayon by sitting atop it, but because it's for the greater good to protect it, therefore it is allowed. Omar Rechava, Omar Rav Yehuda, about 10 lines to the bottom. The first one line is Rechava. Kol harei mace einam laveu. If someone sees a mace, a levaya, and doesn't join to be malavet to escort the mace, Over Misham Naivarush, if I so, you're mocking the floor, you're blaspheming Hashem, Vilmavav Maschar, what's a schar for the Levais Amaze? Am Ravasi, Lovakasoim Ramal Hashem, Chayni Dal, Hashem is gracious to the poor, Machabdoi, Chayni and Evion gives honor to the destitute. Says the Gemara, one last Gemara, Rav Chia, Rav Yunus, Rav Shakli, Valziv, is the Gemara, they're walking in a cemetery. Havikashadi Techelta, Rav Yunus, his tzitzis were dragging the Rav Yechanan on the ground, on the cemetery. Amr le Rav Chia said to him, Delaye, pick up your tzitzis. Kadesh Yomers, people should say the Machar Bar Netzleinu. You don't want the dead to say tomorrow they'll be joining us. And now they're mocking us by showing us the tzitzis, a mitzvah that we cannot do. And of course, this is where it comes from. That when you go to the cemetery, you don't keep your tzitzis out, you tuck them in. And we conclude with one last kasha. Amr le Rav Yonasan said, "And miyadi kuli hai, do the mesim know what's going on in this world?" The pasuk says, "The Mason don't know anything." So Amar Le Rav Chi responds, "If you learned the pasuk, you didn't do chazar. If you did chazar, you didn't do it a third time. If you did it a third time, you didn't have that explained properly to you. Why? Because the pasuk says, for the living, they will die. They know they will die. This is the Sadiqim, that even when they're dead, they're called Chayim. They do indeed know what's going on in this world. And we'll pick it up from here, which the Gemara will lengthily discuss whether and what the Mesim know about what's going on in this world.